Hello everyone and welcome to Renegades React, where we react to things that are both strange, dark, and mysterious. Specifically from Mr. Ballin. And yeah, I gotta be honest, Mr. Ballin, it's been a minute since we've reacted to Mr. Ballin, and I missed you, Mr. Ballin. Please don't leave us again. Y'all keep recommending us to watch Mr. Ballin. Here's the thing about it, whenever we do these reactions, nobody shows up to them. I hate to say it. And I hate that. I hate that because I love these, and plus, it's getting closer and closer to Halloween, so, please share this, like the video, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to keep doing these, is if, we're able to, we get enough likes on here to where it basically makes it to where we can, because we only have enough time to, react to X amount of things in a night. And some Mr. Ballin videos are decently, at a decent length, like this, 21 minutes. Some are in, the 30-plus minute range, and those are, those are something. But this one here is one that I saw, and I was just like, let's see. And then I looked back, and turns out this one was in our recommendations on our Discord. And, yeah, I'm very, very excited to get into this one. So, shocking footage that reveals pure evil. What kind of evil are we talking here? Because there's lawful evil, neutral evil, and just chaotic evil. I think
pure evil is usually chaotic.
Yeah, that's the furthest, because of lawful good, true neutral, chaotic. Yeah. In terms of just, the spectrum.
There's, evil people that won't hurt women and children, that are considered lawful evil.
That's true.
And it's yeah, you suck, but you could suck worse.
And then the chaotic good.
There's, neutral evil that's just kind of that's a force that's not something anybody wants around. But it's typically not doing things just out of a desire to be evil. It just happens to be that it exists for a purpose of something that happens to be considered evil, such as a viral space fleet of bugs, kind of like the Tyranids or something. I consider the Tyranids to be neutral evil.
Yeah.
Because they're not committing evil because they enjoy it. They're doing it out of a need for survival. They don't have a law they'll follow. They'll eat whatever biomass that's available to them. But they are evil because they're eating all the other biomass, which is people and things that are alive. So, and then chaotic evil...
God dang gene stealers.
Chaotic evil is just they'll kick a baby because they think it's funny, So.
Yeah. They'll throw a disabled person headfirst into a wood chipper.
It's literally the definition of both being evil and giving no fucks whatsoever.
Yeah, so
absolutely none.
Chaotic evil, definitely the most pure evil. So, Mr. Ballin's got this video here, so let's check it out.
It's why would you leave a bomb on that bus full of orphans? That's pure evil.
It's I left it on there, but it hasn't exploded yet. Okay, now it's a really bad thing. I was hoping that they would reach the bridge and the bridge would collapse as well, but fuse must have not been long enough. Sorry about that.
I don't know why I thought there's a Schaefer the Dark Lord song about being a supervillain. It's I can't remember the exact words he uses, but something's about my little black heart starts thumping and twerking every time I leave a bomb on a bus full of orphans.
Jesus.
Something like that.
Jesus, that's terrible. Alright, so let's get into this. Alright, John, what do you got?
Today, I'm going to tell you a strange, dark, and mysterious medical mystery. And it actually happened really recently, and it's totally insane. There is not another story I've covered that sounds anything like this. And so if you're a fan of medical mysteries like today's story, keep in mind, we actually have an entire show dedicated to medical mysteries. It's called Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries. It's a podcast, and it's available on all podcast platforms right now for free. But before we get into this medical mystery episode, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do.
Been watching a lot of medical mystery videos lately.
So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the like button's house and reverse all their doorknobs so they turn the wrong way. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's medical mystery.
Alright, there's a light, John. You convinced me.
Yeah, I found this one dude that basically does, like, scientific breakdowns of, like, how people have died, and, like, a lot of the times it involves chemistry and poisonings and stuff. Like, one he did was about a lady that poisoned her husband that she caught cheating. And she used something she thought wouldn't be detectable, but they ended up being able to figure it out whenever he went into the ER finally, but he didn't make it. Like, so she ended up getting charged with murder.
You know, the number one that they use is potassium because it's harder to detect.
This was not potassium, I don't think, but it was, it's like obviously potassium cyanide's a thing.
Well, no, potassium cyanide, they'll detect that, but if you're able to inject them with potassium in a place where it won't show, like, for instance, between the toes, like, if you're able to have them, like, sedated with, like, a sleeping pill, and then, like, inject them with enough potassium, like, between their toes, and basically, too much potassium will cause your heart to stop.
Chubby Emu is the channel that I found.
Chubby Emu. Interesting.
Thallium. It was thallium, I believe.
Oh, thallium? Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because it actually appears in the same column as potassium on the table. But it's, I think, even heavier than potassium.
It's a compound, and compound. That's why you just need, like, a pure, like pure potassium in some ways. Like, find a way, like, to get yourself, like, your hands on, like, some potassium medication and crush it up, and then find a way to inject it.
It essentially causes, like, blockages in, like, the neuron firings and such, like, and
yeah,
starts fucking over your nervous system.
Ooh.
And unfortunately, there's not really, like, an antidote for it either, it doesn't seem like.
That sucks. There's nothing to counteract, like, what's going on, yeah.
It's blood.
My ass.
On the evening of June 7th, 2023, a 36-year-old man named Umar Abdullah walked into his bedroom in Tampa Bay, Florida, and right away he opened up all the windows. Now, keep in mind, Tampa Bay, Florida is really hot. And so by doing this, he was letting in all this really hot air. But Umar did not care. He just wanted whatever was inside of his apartment out. Umar, along with his wife Samira and their 10-month-old daughter, had just gotten back to their apartment after a trip to Ohio, and the second they walked inside, they had smelled this weird smell. And it was something they had never smelled before. This was not like rotten food or anything like that. This was like a chemical smell, but even that wasn't a good description. It was like a cross between chemicals and maybe paint. And so at first, Umar and Samira just walked around their apartment, predominantly in the kitchen, you know, looking for things that could be leaking, you know, in the fridge or in cupboards or whatever, but they couldn't find anything that seemed like it could be the cause of the smell. And it was around this point, when they were totally stumped, that Umar and Samira remembered that their apartment building was extremely well taken care of. Like, repairs were done immediately and all the time in every single unit, and the fact that they had been away in Ohio had been known to their apartment manager, and so they thought, you know, maybe while they were gone, maybe somebody had come in here and maybe touched up some paint or made some repairs or something, even though...
Where me and JT are doing a stream on Friday, Steven's already sending us shit. Steven's already just like, he sent like 8 things already.
Speaking of pure evil, Steven being like, like things he's gonna make you suffer through.
Yeah, basically.
It seemed a bit weird that they hadn't been informed beforehand that, you know,
Yeah,
painting or repairs were going
you
to
should
take place in
definitely
their
check with
apartment.
the landlord
But
right
ultimately,
away.
that's what they chalked it up
Absolutely.
to. And so it was at this point that Umar and Samira walked all around the apartment, opening up all the windows, and Samira also lit a candle as well. And pretty soon, that weird smell disappeared, and both the parents just kind of forgot about it.
Well,
and so
if
Umar
it was
grabbed all their
gas,
luggage
the
from their
candle lighting wouldn't have been good. So apparently it wasn't gas. Or at least not a flammable gas.
Well, yeah, I don't know what it would be. Like, that's weird.
trip and began unpacking it into the drawers and putting toiletries away. And at the same time, Samira put their baby in a high chair in the kitchen, and then Samira began preparing dinner. And a few minutes later, as Umar was still putting things away, he heard Samira calling from the kitchen to, hey, come out here for a second. And so Umar stopped what he was doing, he went into the kitchen, and he looked at Samira, and she was looking very concerned down at their daughter. And their daughter was in her high chair, and her dinner was right in front of her, but she wasn't eating. And their daughter seemed really fussy. And normally, their daughter was such a get-along kid who never fussed, who always ate her food, and so this seemed really out of character. And so both parents kind of stared at the daughter for a second, and then Umar was like, you know what, all the windows are still open, and it's getting pretty hot in here. Maybe the baby's just fussy about the heat. And so Samira agreed that could totally be it, and so the parents went around the apartment, closing
Whatever's
down
in
all
the
the
air
windows,
is something
allowing
like
the air conditioning
poisonous.
to
It's
kick
going to affect the baby faster than it is them.
Well, yeah, because smaller lungs and smaller
Smaller
effectiveness.
dose of anything will affect a smaller person quicker.
Yes.
So.
back on and cool the apartment down. But about an hour later, after the apartment had cooled back down, the baby was still very fussy. And at this point, Umar and Samira were trying to put the baby to bed, and they were really struggling with that. And also, in addition to the baby obviously not feeling very well, Umar and Samira both began to complain that they had headaches. And so at this point, the parents assumed that, you know what, all of this, the baby's behavior and now our headaches must be tied to just the travel we just went through, and we just need a day to recover here. And so they kind of rushed their baby through her bedtime routine and eventually got her down.
Shit.
And then Umar and Samira took some ibuprofen to help with their headaches, and then they too climbed in bed and drifted off to sleep, hoping that when they woke up, everybody would feel better again. But the next morning, nobody was better. In fact, everybody was doing worse. Umar's headache had now gotten much stronger, and Samira, she still had a headache, but also was very lethargic, and the baby was still very fussy. And over the next few days, their symptoms continued to get worse and worse. Umar's headache went from really bad to pretty much blinding, like he couldn't do anything else but think about his headache.
Yeah, think of how
And
that
Samira
baby has to
basically
be
had to lay
feeling.
down
Yeah,
all
that
day.
baby's got to be fucking miserable.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It was like no matter how much she slept, she had zero energy, and their poor baby just continued to cry and fuss all the time, and even began to vomit. And so it seemed pretty obvious by this point, after a few days, that the three of them must have caught some sort of bug while they were traveling. That this was not just jet lag, that they actually had some sort of illness. But the parents were convinced that, they could just kind of rough it out, and eventually, after a couple of days, they would get better. But on the morning
They
of
need to
June
get the hell
14th,
out
so
of
this
that
is now a
apartment.
week after coming back home from their trip, not only were all their symptoms still really bad, but on this particular morning, things took a dark turn. That morning, when Umar went to his daughter's bedroom, he's still dealing with this horrible headache, he makes his way into the bedroom, and he goes down to pick his daughter up from her crib, and as he's reaching down to grab her, he freezes. Because on the bed, on the pillow right behind the baby, is all the baby's hair. The baby had clearly lost huge chunks of her hair. And so Umar at this point
Yeah.
forgot about his headache and yelled for
Something
Samira.
highly
And even though
toxic
she's
is
super
leaking into
lethargic,
their
she could
apartment.
tell this is an emergency, so
yeah.
she got up and made her way into the bedroom, and she looked down too and saw all the hair, and she reached down and scooped the baby up, and she turned the baby over, and sure enough, there was a huge bald spot on the back of their baby's head. But Umar and Samira, they said to each other right away that, wait a minute, I know this is scary, but it is actually a thing that newborn babies sometimes do lose their hair. But when they went online and looked at the age range of when that's kind of a common thing to happen, it was pretty obvious that their baby, being 10 months old,
past that.
was a little bit too old for losing her
Yeah.
hair to be considered a normal thing. And so,
Well, no, that happened to Case when he was like 3 months old. He had like a patch of hair that just like disappeared, and just like it didn't, and it's like he had a bald spot back here, and it worried my sister really bad. But no, it was normal. They took him to the doctor, and everything was good. It's just, it happens occasionally. But no, past 6 months, it is very rare for that to happen.
I know he hypes these stories up in a way that's building on all the bad things happening, and it would be harder to connect them all probably if you weren't already aware that this is a video about a bad story and such, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes when a lot of bad stuff's happening in a very small amount of time, you really gotta pay attention.
You also got to look at the parents, too. I mean, here's the thing. I'm not sure if there's, like, something going on or, like, a marital problem or anything like that that's not being said right now by John, but something else is going... I don't know.
I don't think that's the case. I think they have something toxic leaking into their apartment. Like, probably from underground. Like, I'm worried it's, like, radon gas or something.
Ooh, that'd be
like,
bad.
I don't know if it has a smell. Like, I don't think it does. So that doesn't really add up with the strange smell he was talking about. But, like, they could be being irradiated currently.
That wouldn't be good. Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Samira sat there and continued Googling, what could this be? My 10-month-old baby is losing her hair. And there were lots of explanations ranging from, ringworm to some severe infection to some rare genetic disorder. And all of it was kind of terrifying. And also none of it really lined up with what they were seeing with their daughter. And so the parents were like, you know what? Clearly we don't know what this is. We've all been sick for a week. We have to bring our baby to the doctor.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
as Samira got on the phone and called the baby's doctor, Umar hopped in the shower to get ready to go to the doctor, and as soon as he began shampooing his hair, he noticed clumps of his hair were falling out. And so all of a sudden it dawned on him that whatever's going on with his baby is going on with him, and very likely going on with his wife too. And it was at this point too that Umar remembered that strange smell when they first walked into their apartment after coming back from their trip. Now they had opened up all the windows and lit candles, and the smell had kind of dissipated, and then they had shut the windows again and they hadn't smelled it again. And so Umar began thinking, wait a minute, maybe we've just gone nose blind to the smell, and maybe there's some sort of contamination in the air. Maybe there's a gas leak or something worse than that. And so as soon as Umar got out of the shower and told his wife about how he lost hair and kind of his theory that maybe there was some contamination in their apartment, Umar called his landlord and explained, the whole situation. And the landlord would tell Umar right off the top that, during the time they were in Ohio, nobody went inside their apartment. So there's no fresh paint in there, no maintenance was done. So whatever you smelled was not from us.
I'm paranoid. I'm the kind of person that's like, well, let me just call my landlord to check. And like, if they're like, no, nobody's done anything in your apartment, like, I would have checked that the day I got back and noticed the weird smell, rather than just being like, that had to be what it was,
Yeah.
It's like, man, like, everybody, like, when you have a legitimate concern about something, verify.
Yes.
Like, don't just shove stuff off to the side and be like, oh, it's probably okay. Like,
verify and confirm. There's a kid's life at stake here, man.
I mean, it could be anybody's life at stake, like.
And then the landlord,
a lot of people just don't think about mundane things leading to bad things happening like this.
Not really, no.
It always pays to be cautious at all times. Like, the world's a scary place.
Yeah, it is.
Fraught with danger. Life is.
To Umar that, as scary as it sounds, it's possible that you might have, like, a gas leak inside of your apartment, or maybe you have a Freon leak from your...
This? Oh. It's the cigar punch and the basically the drill for, like,
I saw you messing with that earlier. I was like, is he messing with like Kate's mascara or something? What's going on? Because the way it came out like that, I thought it was a mascara thing.
No, this thing's sharp. It's pretty sharp. So I don't want
something you want to put near your eye much. If you
no. Well, it's also got these little catches here to like catch when it goes into the cigar. So yeah, and plus there's this one too. There's the pitchfork. This is for like basically the roach holder, just like for like if you really want to get those last few puffs on the cigar, there you go.
Yeah.
Also, it's got different hole punches for like different size cigars. Like this is for like really big cigars, and the smaller side's for like normal cigars.
Word.
Yeah.
Your air conditioning system, or maybe there's toxic mold, but whatever it is, we're going to get people in there, we're going to find the issue and solve it. And so later that day, sure enough, a gas inspector showed up to Umar and Samira's apartment, and they checked the entire place, and they could not find any trace of a gas leak. They checked everywhere. There was no leak, but they did tell Umar and Samira that, yes, we can smell a faint trace of some chemical smell, but we don't think it's gas. And then after the gas inspector left, the landlord went out and found a mold inspector who came into Umar and Samira's apartment. They looked everywhere and could not find any mold. Then the landlord brought in a plumber to check the hot water heater, but no issues with that. Then the landlord brought an HVAC company in, and they checked the air conditioning units, and there was no leak. And so finally, after the landlord had kind of run out of ideas for who to bring over to check the apartment, because again, by this point, nobody had found anything wrong with the apartment, Umar just said, you know what, I'm going to call the fire department. And so Umar, he calls the fire department, and the fire department, they send over their hazardous materials team or their hazmat team. And so they go into the apartment and they look everywhere, and there is nothing. They could not find any source that was causing the smell at all. It seemed very much like their apartment was totally safe and fine. But by this point, it's now been 2 weeks since Umar, Samira, and their baby had come back from that trip, and they still felt totally horrible. Umar still had his headaches, he was still losing his hair. Samira had begun losing her hair as well. She still had her headaches, she still felt lethargic, and their baby was still losing her hair, and she still was fussy and miserable. And all three of them now had developed this weird shortness of breath, where they'd just be walking through the apartment, and suddenly it was like they couldn't even breathe. And so now they've had all these people who can't find anything wrong with their apartment. They'd gone to their doctors, and the doctors had no idea what was wrong with them. And so it was kind of like they had no idea what to do.
Makes me wonder if the fire department had a Geiger counter.
I would hope. Like, that's the thing. If all else fails, like why not? Why not bring out like a Geiger counter or a Roentgen meter and just like basically just like find out if radiation is a potential threat?
Because when you kind of think about it, like, people just got really sick, all their hair fell out back in the day, like, just lesions appeared, and then they died, and people would be like, what the fuck? And they would attribute it to, like, someone must have cursed them.
Or the plague or something like that.
And it's like, whenever you know about nowadays that radiation is a thing, and then you start seeing what radiation does to someone, you're like, that would look a lot like a curse if you didn't know there was radiation present, you know?
Yeah. Oh man, there was
like what is happening to them right now. It's kind of like, this kind of seems like their apartment's cursed, and I'm like, which means to me that probably there's something radioactive
potentially
that's come from somewhere, and like the most common way that can just spontaneously happen is radon gas leaking up from the ground.
Well, you know, there was actually this movie. It was a scene. It was pretty sad. These kids were playing out in the desert. It was in like a Middle Eastern country, and they were like playing around. And then the little younger brother was basically just like digging in the dirt with the sand, digging in dirt with a stick, and he hits something metal. He's like, huh. He digs it up, and it's a cylindrical like tube that's in the middle of the desert, and basically the older brother comes over. He's like, hey, let me look at that. And he pushes his little brother back, and he like there's a little hatch thing. He pries it open with a knife that he has, and he reaches in, and he's like, it's warm. Why is it warm?
No boy, no.
Well, here's the thing. Later on, they found out that it was a nuclear weapon, and the boy who touched it got
uranium. He
basically touched pure like uranium decay, and yeah, he wound up dying from radiation sickness. And the little brother suffered a little bit. You know, he got a pretty decent blast because he was near it, but the older brother died, and basically the little brother, he thought that you know, God should have taken him. They were from a very religious family, and it's like, God should have taken me. My brother was so much stronger, so much better. And then the mother ran in and slapped him and said, don't you ever say that. Yeah. Don't you ever wish for that. Not with I'm here.
There are real incidences of similar things.
Oh,
happening.
yeah.
Like, one thing I wouldn't be surprised if Mr. Ballin has a video on it somewhere, but I know Kyle Hill has a video on it, is where people in, I think, Mexico, or somewhere in South America, if not Mexico, found discarded medical equipment that was improperly discarded. And somehow found, like, tubes of uranium dust, basically, from that. And it was like a glowing powder, so they thought they had found some kind of treasure. And, like, they were kind of looking at it from, like, a religious thing, like, you know, hey, we can do, like, paints and stuff for religious ceremonies, and then they gave it to kids to, like, finger paint themselves with and put it on.
Yep.
Fucked all of them up.
You know,
It's really sad.
You
Like,
ever hear...
a really young girl, like, was playing with it, like, face paint and stuff, and died from it.
You ever hear of the Radium Girls?
Yeah, I think he has a video on that, too.
Yeah, the Radium Girls basically were not made aware of the material that they were using was nuclear and was very highly radiated, and all of them died young because of it. It's fucked up, dude. It's fucked up.
But clearly this
Radiation's,
crisis,
in my opinion, probably the second scariest thing on Earth next to sharks.
It's up there. I mean, I saw Chernobyl, and I'll say this: there's a scene in it where literally it's like all these people go to this bridge, to like look at the light coming from the blown open like nuclear core, and the wind is blowing in their direction, and it basically blows like all this nuclear material onto them, and every person that set foot on that bridge, men, women, and children, every single one of them within a few days was dead. And it's just, oof.
My brain's drawing a blank on it, but you've heard me say it a bunch of times. It's my favorite Japanese ghost.
Onryo?
Onryo's.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, so radiation is like a real life, actually existing version of an Onryo, basically.
Oof.
That's why it's scary.
Yeah.
Like, because, I mean, you could walk into a place and your death sentence just got signed and you never knew it. Like,
Yep.
it's a scary thing. It's an invisible kind of almost like evil spirit type thing. Like, but it's scientific, obviously. Like, we can prove it's science, but it's science that works in the same capacity as what we would expect an evil spirit to work, you know?
But to the uninitiated, it's an evil spirit.
Yeah, I mean, like, it may as well be an evil spirit. Like, just because we can explain how it works doesn't mean it's not terrifying. Like,
oh, it is terrifying. It's god awful when you see like the results of a proper dose of radiation like that.
Yeah.
Jesus.
was only getting worse and worse and worse. And so Umar felt like he had no more options. He couldn't leave his apartment. He couldn't afford to do that. And so they were just stuck in this place that seemed toxic. But all that would change on June 25th, so 2.5 weeks after they came home from that trip, because on this day, Umar discovered something about that chemical smell they caught right when they came back in after the trip. You know, the smell that all the people that had come into the apartment had sort of noticed but couldn't identify. On June 25th, Umar figured something out about that smell.
What'd you find out, Umar?
Ad break.
Late last year, we launched a brand new, strange, dark, and mysterious show called Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries. And so far, people love it. It is a free weekly show where each week we explore a new, baffling mystery originating from the one place we all can't escape. Our own bodies. Topics discussed on the show range from obscure diseases and freak occurrences to totally weird medical mishaps that sometimes result in big, amazing discoveries and other times result in just unimaginable suffering and death. So, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious,
I'm sure he's going to talk about
one
of the other things Kyle talked about,
go look up and
which was the X-ray device
that
that a hospital had that was supposed to be screening for things like tumors and stuff like that. But due to the fact that the company incorrectly like shipped it out and then denied for a really long time that they had done anything incorrectly, the computer program that it was running from was fucked and actually gave people like really bad, like unsafe levels of radiation exposure when they got x-rays in that machine.
Well, let's think about x-rays. X-rays are like dangerous. They can be dangerous. And that's why you're like only allowed a certain amount of x-rays a year.
And it was like a dose high enough that it was like people realized something was wrong as the button was pressed for their x-rays to be done.
Like they could feel it burning?
Felt pain and saw flashes and shit. Like
yes.
That much,
that's not good.
Should not be happening, you know?
That is not good.
I can't remember the results if people died from it, but I know it definitely fucked up a couple people. And it's like, that's terrifying. Like, that would just be lovely to be going in for what you think is a routine medical x-ray that's supposedly totally safe, and then all of a sudden you just got fatally irradiated.
Mm-hmm. Sounds about par for the course.
On any podcast platform, and boom, you're in. You got yourself a new weekly show. But if you're super impatient like I am, and you can't wait a whole week to get a new episode, well, with your Prime membership, you can listen to an entire batch of 8 episodes at once, because we release them 8 at a time on Amazon Music.
Also, one of my friends on
Amazon
Facebook
Music,
had posted their story recently about going in for a MRI, or is it CAT scan? What's the big tube?
That's an MRI.
Yeah, MRI. They had forgotten that a long time ago they had a dermal piercing. And the top of it had come off, and so they just kind of were like, yeah, it's like, kind of forgot about it. They remembered it when they got in the MRI machine.
You know, there was one
it's like, wait, something's wrong, and then they were like, oh, shit, and so long story short, they had to go get that taken out and then go back for their MRI. And
so
fuck.
You know, there was actually a guy who went in for one, and he went in for one, and they said, do you have any metal on you or anything like that? And he said, no metal, no nothing, everything's good. He's like, all right.
I know this fucking story.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So he's sitting in there, and then the machine turns on. As soon as the machine turns on, all of a sudden he feels like this sharp pain darts straight up inside of him, straight to his sternum right here. Turns out the guy had a butt plug in.
Oh, fuck!
And it had a metal core.
Okay, that was not what I thought you were going to say.
He thought it was just a pure silicone one. No, it turns out it was a silicone one with a metal core.
Oh.
And he fucked himself.
Did it yank it up into his chest?
It ripped straight through his intestinal chain.
Damn.
And it got caught in his sternum right here.
So did it
He lived.
Yeah, I was
they
gonna
had
say,
they had to remove, I think, like 20 feet of his small intestine.
I was gonna say he's lucky it didn't kill him.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing.
I don't know. At that point, though, I would almost feel like I was unlucky it didn't kill him.
Well, funny enough, he tried to sue the hospital because he thought they were at fault for it. The hospital countersued him and basically won the case, and we're just like, look, we're not going to ask you for any money. We feel like what happened to you is embarrassing enough. But don't sue us for something that you made a mistake on.
Yeah.
And basically that was it.
Yeah. And, I mean, if anything, try to sue the butt plug company for not making it completely obvious what their butt plug was made out of. I thought you were going to say he had a cock ring. I was gonna be
No, that one would be painful too, but no, the butt plug one, I heard about that one, and I literally, when I heard about it...
When I say that, I mean not the thing that goes around it, but obviously a piercing.
That goes through. Yeah.
There are no ads. And if all this was not enough to sell you on maybe giving the show a try, well then stick around at the end of this video and I'll play you a sneak peek from our newest episode of Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries. Umar was in his apartment, feeling completely miserable, as was his wife and his daughter, who were in the bedroom. But at some point, Umar suddenly caught a whiff of that weird chemical smell. And as soon as he smelled it, he sort of began to cough, and he was about to call his landlord and be like, hey, I smelled it again. But he decided on this day, instead of calling anybody else, he was going to run an experiment of his own. And so instead of trying to get away from the smell, Umar began smelling in the air as deep as he could to try to kind of figure out where the smell was coming from. And so he began walking around his apartment, sniffing the air, kind of tracing the smell.
Bet you if they had a dog, the dog would have figured out where it was coming from much earlier than they would have.
No doubt.
The dog probably would have been like pawing at something, being like, like,
Yeah.
It's like, I smell something weird coming from here, guys.
Yeah.
Dogs
Following
tend
the
to do
smell.
that. Either that or the dog would have ran to the opposite side of the house from where it was coming from, like knowing it would
To get away from it.
want to be breathing it as much as it could. You know.
Yeah.
Through his kitchen, down the hallway, all the way to his front door. And when he got to his front door, he smelled it again, and he could tell the smell was the strongest right now. And so, feeling a sudden jolt of adrenaline, he grabbed the door, flung it open, half expecting to see like a chemical cloud floating in the air in the hallway. But as soon as he opened the door, there was nothing outside. And when he smelled in the hallway, you know, the smell wasn't really there anymore. And so he kind of looked around for a second, feeling kind of silly.
You know, I
and
thought
then he
about
shut
it,
the
too.
door, and he was about to just
The title doesn't track for radiation. Pure evil. Somebody's poisoning them somehow.
go back into his apartment and just kind of accept that once again I got no idea what's going on here. But then he stopped and he turned back around and looked.
Wait a fucking minute. Is this the one with the... Oh.
Have you heard about this?
I think I've seen the footage that Mr. Ball is going to show. Oh boy.
Is there somebody coming by and like pumping poison into their front door slot?
You'll see.
Looked at the
If I'm
door,
right, you'll
like
see.
the actual front door of his apartment, and he began smelling the door. And the door definitely had the chemical smell. And so he began smelling and tracing his hands all over this door, not even sure what he was looking for. But eventually he worked his way all the way to the bottom of the door. And that's when he felt something. And so suddenly
Wet.
Umar got down and stared at this strange thing he had found on his door. And as soon as he saw what it was, he jumped up and ran to his wife to tell her what he had just found. After talking with his wife about this thing, they came up with a plan. Late that night, Umar waited until the entire apartment complex seemed really quiet, and then as quietly as he could, he opened up that front door, he stepped out into the hallway, and then he made his way over to the big fake plant that stood at the end of this hallway that was kind of right outside, kind of adjacent to his door, and he hid something in the plant, and then Umar went back into his apartment and he shut the door. And on June 27th, so 2 days later, the moment Umar and Samira had been waiting for finally arrived. At around 5:30 p.m. that evening, suddenly that chemical smell began to emanate through the apartment, and their baby began coughing so badly she began vomiting. And so as Samira was tending to their baby, Umar very quietly opened up his front door, looked in the hallway, didn't see anyone, and he rushed over to that plant, and he took the thing he had hidden a couple of days before, and he went back into his apartment, shut the door, and went into his office. And when Umar came out of that office a little while later, Samira was waiting and she was looking at him, and as Umar came out, it was like he was totally ashen-faced, he looked completely shocked, and he could barely speak. And Samira said, "What's going on? What did you learn?" And Umar said, "We have to get out of here right now. Get the baby. We have to leave right now. We're going to the hospital." And so as Samira bundled up their baby and they started getting their things together, Umar called 911 and told the operator what he had just discovered. The strange thing Umar had discovered on his front door 2 days earlier on June 25th was a weird crack at the very base of his door where you could basically see from inside of his apartment out into the hallway. And the thing Umar and his wife had decided to hide in the hallway in that plant was a video camera aimed at their front door, because they were suspicious that something was making its way through that crack in the door into their apartment, and they wanted to catch it on camera. And that's exactly what happened 2 days later, when around 5:30 p.m., their daughter began coughing, and Umar began to smell that smell in the apartment, and he rushed out, he got his camera, he went back into his office, he watched
Asian
the
dude with
footage,
flat.
and he
Yep, I've seen this one.
not believe what his camera had recorded. Just before 5:30 p.m. on June 25th, so right before the smell came into the apartment, on video you see this guy walk up the stairs and enter the hallway right in front of Umar and Samira's apartment door. And this man had a syringe in his hand, and he knelt down and he placed the syringe into that crack at the bottom of Umar and Samira's door, and he pushed the plunger of the syringe before pulling the syringe out, quickly turning and disappearing down the stairs. And so as Umar and Samira and their baby rushed to the hospital after discovering this video and after calling 911 to tell police what they saw on this video, the police rushed to Umar and Samira's apartment complex. Not to go to Umar and Samira's apartment, though. Instead, to go to the apartment right below Umar and Samira. The man who rented that apartment right below them was a 36-year-old named Zuming Lee. He was a married father of two who was working on his PhD in chemistry from the University of South Florida. And Umar and Samira thought of him as being a really nice guy. You know, he was very quiet, he kept to himself. He even gave them a gift after their daughter was born. But on this evening, when the police arrived at Zuming's apartment and knocked on the door, when Zuming opened it up, he was immediately arrested. It would turn out, despite Zuming giving Umar and Samira that gift after their baby was born, well, that was the end of him liking Umar and Samira. Because as soon as they came home with their baby, Zuming became obsessed with how noisy their baby was. Even if their baby was barely being loud, it completely consumed Zuming's mind. It was like he was obsessed with listening for this baby. And then suddenly it wasn't just the baby that annoyed him, it was even the slightest noise he heard above him coming from Umar and Samira's apartment that totally sent him into a rage. And so Zuming began constantly going to the homeowners association to complain about the baby and, you know, the toilet sounds and the footsteps he was hearing. And when that wasn't enough, he began going to the police about it. Now, Umar and Samira had been told that their downstairs neighbor really was upset with how loud they were being, and so they did everything they could to be quiet. They felt so bad that they were coming off as being these very loud and disrespectful people, which they were not. I mean, they did have a little baby, and babies make noise, but I mean, they were doing everything they could to be quiet. And so they had no idea that Zuming was still just completely furious at them. And eventually, Zuming's fury just became completely unhinged, and he used his chemistry know-how, because remember, he's studying for his PhD in chemistry, to begin putting together this deadly mixture of chemicals that contain things like methadone and hydrocodone, and he put them into a syringe, and he began injecting them into Umar and Samira's apartment to poison them, to make them be quiet.
This was last year.
What the fuck, man?
This guy is evil. This guy is, once again, I'm not sure how mentally disturbed this man is. I don't care. What he's doing right now is fucking evil. Period.
And so by the time Zuming was arrested, he had been injecting these deadly chemicals into their apartment for a month. That was obviously the cause of all of Umar and Samira and their baby's symptoms. It was this poison. Umar, Samira, and their baby would get treatment and they would fully recover from their poisoning. But
That's
very
good, at
likely,
least.
had they not been quick thinkers and put that camera in place and caught Zuming in the act, it's entirely possible that over time, the poison that was being injected into their apartment would have killed them. Officials are still investigating this case, as it's still relatively new. However, the legal process was paused when Zuming was deported back to China. Zuming has not been convicted of any crime, and the criminal case remains open. And if Zuming ever were to step foot on U.S. soil, he would be arrested immediately.
He got deported, but I'm like, why? Throw his ass in jail, man. He committed a crime on American soil, and unless, like, I know what it is. I know why he was sent back to the motherland. Do you know why? Because I guarantee you, the Chinese government found out that he was a genius chemist. It's just he was a little batshit crazy, and they basically made a plea deal with the Justice Department and probably said, please just deport him. We'll take him back. We'll make sure he's punished and all this. Just, you know, we just really believe it would be better if, you know, you deported him and let him come back home. And I guarantee you, as soon as he set foot back in China, they put his ass to work, like developing chemicals and shit. Because that's the thing, the Chinese government, if they find out that they can get something out of you, and they can squeeze any leverage to, like, make you a puppet, they'll do it.
Could be.
And I guarantee you that's what happened with Zuming.
Okay, here is the clip from our newest episode of Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries. Enjoy. One day in 2009, a high school janitor was mopping the hallway in between classes when he heard a heavy scraping sound. The janitor looked up and he saw a student slowly walking towards him. The boy's grotesquely swollen right leg dragged along the floor, and he walked with a dramatic limp. The janitor smiled and waved at the boy as he approached. After all, this boy was a familiar sight. It took him so long to get between classes, he would have to leave 10 minutes early just to make it to his next one barely on time. And so the janitor saw him going through this routine all the time. Just then, the bell rang, and more students streamed into the hallway. They jostled past the limping student, knocking him off balance, as a few kids snickered at the boy. For 3 years, the janitor had seen this happen every single day. He wanted to yell at the kids to stop being bullies, but he knew that would only make things worse. So instead, he gave the young man a reassuring pat on the back as he hobbled by, and the janitor just hoped that whatever was wrong with this boy would clear up soon. So that's the end of today's medical mystery story. If stories like this one appeal to you, remember we have an entire show dedicated to stories just like this one. It's called Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries, and it's available on all podcast platforms for free. But you can listen to episodes early and free on Amazon Music. So that's going to do it. Thank you so much for your support. Until next time, see ya. Wait, don't go anywhere. If you're looking for more strange, dark, and mysterious videos, click here.
Yeah, I can't remember if you heard it, bless you, recently, but, the, one that I was listening to about the, family that was eating the noodles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was listening to that down here while you were sitting here, like, working on something and whatnot.
Probably.
It's like they tried to, like, thaw out these frozen noodles that were made, like, a year ago. And they were made with a process of, fermentation, and it's fermented corn noodles, and something about that can create a chemical that ends up being extremely poisonous. And, basically, like, all 4 members of the family that ate the corn noodles, like, out of all of them that ate them, only one didn't, and he was the only one that survived. Because he didn't eat it, and literally fatally poisoned the rest of them.
You talking about noodles? I want to get this.
That was another crazy, like, medical mystery story I heard recently.
Yeah.
Ramen kit.
Yeah. It's 3 portions, and it's 3 portions in one. I would like to do that for y'all one day. Build like a decent ramen bowl.
Yeah, I've never had like legitimate ramen, so I'd be down to try.
I would too. But that dude, Zuming, he should be in jail right now. 100%.
He should have been zooming off to jail instead of back to China.
Dun, 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 dun. That's Nick, everybody. He'll be here all week. Don't you worry. Okay, but yeah. Anywho,
Is it still messed up if I made the joke about a piece of shit?
No, I mean I find it completely and totally palatable. Dude's a piece of shit and deserves to be like strung up for that, in my opinion, and just in my humble opinion. So anyway, that's gonna do it. So everyone, thank you all very much for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Nate.
I'm Nick.
Y'all be good people. Be safe. Peace.